Another damn bus. How many buses can you see in one day? I really hate these shows. I never liked talking to salespeople, and it was even worse with public transport salespeople. They know you have tax money to spend, and they'll be happy to help you do it. I had a managing director to report to, so I slowly walked around another bus, listening to a moderately attractive saleswoman describe their latest low-floor model. I plopped down in one of the passenger seats as she continued her monotonous speech. The chair was quite comfortable, which surprised me. I took a closer look at the chair next to me, feeling the cushion and soft fabric that supported my butt so well. I smiled internally, knowing that these chairs would not last even a year in actual use. Public transport passengers carry all sorts of objects onto their seats, not counting intentional damage. The saleswoman noticed the concern in my eyes. "We would never recommend these chairs for mass production, Mr. Pritchard." She smiled, which brightened the bus a little. "We have a large range of more durable chairs. We partner with Friedman and create solutions to suit your needs." Of course they do. I just wondered why they would show something that we would never buy. I nodded my head so that she understood that there was no need to continue this topic. Unfortunately, this gave her an excuse to talk about all the other partners in her company. She listed companies that produce GPS, automatic passenger counting systems, fare payment systems, and many other well-known companies that produce equipment for public transport. I tried not to yawn. Everyone on the bus already knew every company she mentioned. The list of companies producing GPS for public transport is not that long. We politely let her continue. I had been on my feet for the better part of 4 hours, which was starting to take its toll, so I stayed seated and feigned interest, moving my eyes from one feature to another as the saleswoman pointed them out. My mind quickly wandered away from the boring sales pitch. How did I end up working for a public transport company for 20 years? I didn't dream of working for a bus company as a child. It just happened that way, and now I'm stuck. I know so much about public transport that my job has become trivial. Problems that previously seemed insurmountable now only cause a smile. I'm paid too much to start over somewhere else, and the pension plan is quite lucrative. Life wasn't bad. My wife, Mary, and I live in a nice home and have never had to worry about paychecks or losing my job. My life simply lacks that spark that I imagine in other professions. I was thinking about taking out my phone and checking the market when the entire interior of the bus changed. A woman in a flowing black dress walked through the double doors of the bus. She had silky long black hair that went straight down her back, just like my wife's. She wore moderately high heels with straps around her tanned ankles. The heels highlighted her perfect calves, which were hidden behind the silky dress. The dress emphasized her curves from her small waist to her hidden breasts. The neckline of the dress was too high to show off the gorgeous cleavage I knew was there. Her eyes were bright, and her lips were wearing some kind of lipstick that gave it a shine, but not too much. The woman reminded me of my wife, only a little younger and much curvier. I realized I was staring at her and quickly returned my gaze to the wheelchair spaces the saleswoman was demonstrating. It was very difficult to use my peripheral vision to take in the beautiful woman as she walked down the aisle of the bus. I'm married and would never risk my marriage for an affair, but I'm still a man. God, how I wanted to study this girl. The public transportation business has its share of beautiful women, but this girl was head and shoulders above. She looked like she should be working at some law firm in Manhattan, or at least playing a lawyer on television. I noticed that some of the other gentlemen on the bus were no longer interested in the sales pitch either. I didn't know why I was a little nervous when she approached me. She reached my seat and suddenly turned around to sit directly opposite me. Her dress fluttered slightly over my hand, and this caused an involuntary shiver throughout my body. I liked the feeling and felt like an idiot for liking it. Even if I was in the market, this girl was far from my level. I looked at her, following the movement of her dress as she sat down. She smiled lightly and began massaging her beautiful ankle. I answered her with my stupidest smile. I never knew how to act in front of women who could make men drool. "I chose the wrong shoes," she whispered. I looked at the seats behind us and saw that they were empty. I couldn't believe she was talking to me. I wish my wife was here to act as a buffer. I didn't know what to say or if I should say anything at all. All I knew was that my wife always takes her shoes off after a long day in heels. I pressed my toes against the heels of my shoes and took them off. She saw this as she was concentrating on her ankles, laughed quietly, and took off her heels. I smiled a little less stupidly, glad I helped. It was still nice that the blood flowed freely through my legs. Our eyes returned to the saleswoman who was demonstrating a wheelchair lift system. The saleswoman took the control panel for the cable lift and carried it out of the bus to continue the demonstration. Most people followed her. I stayed and continued to need my socks. My new barefoot friend stayed with me. I looked at her and decided to start a conversation. Since we had common foot problems, I was less nervous. First time at the exhibition, I assumed this was the case because she was the only woman without what appeared to be tennis shoes. Yes, she smiled at me, which was even more beautiful than I expected. I didn't think it would be a marathon. She extended her hand. My name is Katie, by the way. I took her hand, but didn't shake it. It was more of a firm touch. Doug Pritchard, I replied. Her hand was as soft as it looked. My wife's hands were just as soft. I started to miss home. I realized I was still holding her hand when she glanced at my grip. I clumsily returned her hand to its place. Are you going to buy buses? She was still smiling, even though I jerked my hand away. No, our park will be in operation for another 7 years. I continued, unable to take my eyes off her eyes. Just trying to stay informed. I smiled back as her smile didn't go away. Are you looking? God, no. I'm new, just trying to figure it out. She started putting on her heels, which broke our eye contact. This is all new to me. I never thought public transport was so complicated. I guess to the uninitiated, public transport seems like a simple operation. In fact, it's terribly difficult, and federal laws make it even more difficult. Don't worry, you'll get used to it with time. I wasn't sure she intended to stay in this area. If she had asked, I would have told her to run and never look back. She started overeating the second shoe. Doug, I'm here alone. Could you join me for lunch? She glanced at me as she fastened the last strap of her shoe. You have to understand that this was a really strange situation for me. Women who looked like Katie were never interested in having lunch with me, even when I was at my best. It was completely unexpected, and I responded like an idiot. I'm married, I said, before realizing that it sounded like I thought she was offering more than just a sandwich. She laughed. Happily, I hope. Her smile was contagious. You're lucky to have someone around. Oh no, Mary didn't come this time. Now I felt even more stupid. I couldn't look at Katie's face. I felt too stupid. It's just a sandwich, Doug. I hate sitting alone in places like this. She stood up, waiting for an answer. Of course, I apologize. I stammered. I didn't mean to imply anything. I quickly put on my shoes and followed her off the bus, ignoring the ongoing demonstration of the wheelchair lift. There's a nice deli on the corner that makes a great turkey and bacon sandwich that I never miss when I come here. I was pointing to the doors that seemed a mile away on the other side of the showroom. So, you're here for the full 4 days? She started making small talk as we walked to the delicatessen. Yes, we are leaving on Sunday evening. And you? Small talk is annoying, but it's better than silence. Yes, I'm leaving on Monday morning. Her pace quickened. This is the first time someone has paid me for a trip. I'm trying to fit in a little sightseeing. She looked at me. Are you allowed to do this? Of course, in reality, if you pretend to be interested in the stand, they will treat you to restaurants all over the city. I loved being a business travel expert. The company that sells the buses we were on rented a riverboat for the evening. Free food and drinks if you pretend to be interested. I enjoyed the role of the expert. I usually only accepted free treats when my wife was with me. You mean on the Mississippi? I think she's interested in me. Yes, with a full program of entertainment. I pointed to the corner as we exited the showroom. I felt hungry as we approached the delicatessen. We waited patiently for the light to turn green. How many times have you been here? More small talk. At least we weren't looking at cars. Third time here. The light still hasn't changed. I usually go every 3 years when there are big exhibitions. I looked at her. I usually skip the smaller shows. I acted like I had a choice when in fact it was my boss who decided when I could or couldn't go. The light changed and we crossed the street to a delicatessen. I loved the way her dress fluttered in the light breeze created by the buildings. I remembered how Mary wore summer dresses, and the fabric seduced me in the same way that Katie's dress did now. As we entered, several heads turned in our direction. I knew they weren't looking at me. Katie didn't seem to notice and ignored it. I was beaming with pride. I knew they were trying to figure out my secret. Little did they know that it was the right bus, the right time. I ordered my favorite turkey and bacon sandwich and iced tea. Katie ordered half a turkey and bacon sandwich with lettuce. We chose a table by the window to watch people pass by. For such a beautiful woman, Katie was quite easy to talk to. Over lunch, we talked about movies and TV shows. I tried to find out a little about her, but she avoided the topic, saying she didn't want to talk about work. I agreed and returned to our discussion of Game of Thrones. I never thought that women like her could be people like everyone else. Katie was very approachable, although I would never consider that in a literal sense. I was just enjoying lunch. I reminded myself to call my wife tonight. On the way back to the exhibit, Katie almost slipped on a curb, and I grabbed her arm to break her fall. I was surprised at the speed and confident support I was able to provide. I've never been particularly athletic and would normally be embarrassed in a situation like this. I put her on her feet and smiled. Gotta be careful with those iced teas. She giggled at my stupid joke. It's good that I have a knight nearby. Katie quickly checked her heels to make sure they were still functional. We'll have to remember to wear sneakers next time. I still held her hand, although she was already standing quite confidently. Her skin was soft and at a pleasant temperature. Despite the pleasant sensations, I decided to disconnect. We continued towards the exhibition, but a little slower. We entered the same large doors through which we had left earlier. I felt a little awkward, not knowing how to leave and continue the day. I was sure she had better things to do than follow me. I need to check out the route software benches after lunch. I actually needed to check them out. We were having problems exporting data in our current software, which was causing us to waste a lot of time. Got it. I'm going to see the railroad cars. She looked a little lost. The size of these exhibitions can be daunting. Thanks for lunch. It was a pleasure. She smiled and I blushed. Of course, anytime. I'm sure we'll meet again. I started to walk away. Before I was married, I would have paid a fortune to drool in the presence of such a woman, but now I was looking for a reason to leave. I turned a little too quickly and walked away. Doug. It sounded like an afterthought. I turned around with a questioning look. Could you show me how to get on this river cruise? She tilted her head slightly and looked down at me. A very charming look for her. There was no chance that I would refuse, and I think she knew it. Of course, Katie, follow me. Once again, I felt like an expert teaching a beginner. I headed back to the bus where I met her. She smiled and walked next to me. What seemed difficult for a beginner could not be easier for a seasoned professional. Luckily, the same saleswoman was still on duty and the bus was empty. I looked at her badge. Hello, Debbie. We are looking at expanding the service. Could you give me the contact information for your technicians so we can work out the specifications for the tender? It was like throwing worms in front of a hungry fish. I can offer you something even better, Doug. She was busy reading my badge. All of our technicians and the owner himself will be available this evening. Would you two like to be our guests on the river cruise? She took the bait as expected. That would be great, Debbie. I smiled and received a light hip bump from Katie. It was like we had been friends all our lives. We followed Debbie to a small table where she fished a couple of tickets out of a drawer. Meet at Pier 3 between 17:30 and 18 o'clock. Debbie pointed to the instructions on the tickets themselves. Come hungry and thirsty. She smiled as she handed us the tickets. I thanked her and walked away from the booth with Katie. It was easy. Katie grabbed my hand for a moment. It was a friendly gesture, a thank you for the ticket. Are you going out tonight? I was a little surprised that she asked. I'm not sure. I usually only go to free events with my wife. I didn't know why I felt the need to mention Mary again. I think I felt guilty communicating with such a beautiful woman without Mary's knowledge. Maybe I felt even more guilty because of the stupid fantasies running through my head. Katie laughed at my hesitation. Well, I'm going. I'd love to have you there so I'll have someone to talk to. Katie gave me a slightly sad look to emphasize her loneliness. I will think. I wasn't sure why she wanted me around. We didn't work together. You know what? Call your wife and tell her you need to save a lady in distress. She smiled at me again. If she has no objections, meet me there. Katie said this as she left. Thanks for lunch. She turned and disappeared into the aisles. I felt like an idiot. Kathy got it right that I wouldn't go on the river cruise without talking to Mary. Katie couldn't possibly be interested in me, but I pretended to think so. I was shocked that she didn't just say goodbye and run away. As nice as she was, I think she just wanted a friendly face at the party. I finally got to the hotel around 4. My feet hurt and I walked around barefoot, praying that the carpet would have been cleaned at least within the last century. I lay down on the bed and dialed Mary's number. Hi, dear. My standard greetings for the last 25 years. Hey, baby. Are you having fun? She was darling, and I was baby. You'd think we would have given this up years ago, but it was already a habit. Everything is the same, new sellers. She already knew that. She's been to several of these herself. It's a shame you're not here. Me too. I wasn't sure if it was true, but I knew she missed me. What do you want to do for your birthday? I forgot my birthday is next week. 42 years crept up on me pretty quickly. I don't know, maybe we should go to that seafood restaurant we went to a few months ago. We usually just chose a place for dinner. Neither of us were big partygoers. I really liked their stuffed flounder. Gentle wave, I'll make a reservation and we can change it if you want to go somewhere else. Mary loved to plan everything. I already bought you a gift, you know. She tried to sound mysterious. I knew what I wanted, but I didn't think she meant it. Will you keep me waiting? I'll let her play her game. She wanted to pique my curiosity. There really wasn't a single product sold in stores that got me excited. Conveniences and fleeting pleasures such as stuffed flounder now mattered more. Well, until your birthday, but yeah, that's a secret for now. I could hear her smile. Nice cryptic answer to keep me on my toes. I guess it's already in the house, and I'll see it when I get back. I think she enjoyed teasing me. What will you do tonight? Well, the two can play a game of teasing. Actually, the young lady invited me on a river cruise. I smiled, but tried to pretend that this was normal. I heard a small chuckle from the other side of the line. And this young lady is beautiful. She knew me too well. There was no chance that I would ever cheat on her. Well, to tell you the truth, she's just beautiful. I had never told my wife anything other than white lies, and I wasn't about to start now. We somehow bonded over sore feet and ended up going to a gourmet store together for lunch. So this will be your second date. She giggled. Maybe I shouldn't let you go to exhibitions anymore. I think I'm her casual companion. I told the truth. She's new at the show and stuck here alone. I didn't say I was going to go. I wanted to make sure she knew she would always be my one and only. Doug, don't sit in the hotel room. Go help the poor girl before everyone gets drunk. Yes, public transport specialists under the influence of alcohol are not a pretty sight. I was glad that Mary trusted me, or at least my inability to attract young, beautiful women. Okay, I'll go, but don't blame me if I have to break her heart. There was more giggling on the other side of the line. Yes, she trusted my lack of attractiveness. After a short pause, you know I love you, right? I already knew the answer. I just repeated it from time to time. Yes, and I love you more than you can imagine. She sounded a little more serious than usual. I don't know what exactly was in her tone, but it sounded sincere and not familiar. I liked the way she said it. We said goodbye, and I said I would call tomorrow. The way Mary said she loved me made me a little emotional. Maybe for my birthday I'll get what I really want. Mary naked and in my arms. We stopped having sex several years ago. Mary was no longer interested. I wasn't sure which switch was turned off, but we hadn't been together for the past 2 years. Before we slowed down, we were as active as most couples, and Mary seemed to enjoy sex. I tried to make some moves, but was always rejected in a sweet and gentle way. I even went so far as to directly talk about this problem, but somehow the topic always changed. Lack of sex would never be a reason for divorce. I still have memories of our past sexual adventures, so I never felt deprived. I just missed Mary's closeness and touch. I could and will live without sex. I didn't want to put any more pressure on Mary about this. I felt that talking further would feel like pressure and would only lead to bad feelings. I'll just wait for her, and I'll wait forever. I jumped in the shower to get ready for the cruise. 6 hours at the exhibition leaves a residue on the body that can only be washed off with warm water. I knew it wasn't a date, but I was a little excited, thinking there was a beautiful woman waiting for me tonight. I remembered my dates with Mary before we were married and the anticipation they created. I wasn't sure about her feelings then, so everything was risky. Now we take each other's love for granted. There is comfort in it, but I miss the excitement. I dried myself off and put on jeans and a rust-colored collared shirt. I took out my comfortable shoes, which looked more like improved moccasins. I wasn't sure how they fit into the fashion world, but my feet were happy. I was glad that it was warm outside and I didn't have to carry a jacket with me. Free food, free drinks, and a pretty girl next to me. Here's how to make an old man happy. I arrived at the pier a little later than expected. At first, I went in the wrong direction and had to walk along the river. When I finally arrived, everyone was already sitting down and I didn't see Katie. I was a little disappointed that I didn't meet her at the dock. The boat wasn't that big. I could explore and find Katie. Before I reached the first ramp, I already had a drink in my hand. My choice is whiskey and water. I drink them slowly to better control myself. There was a small table with a bartender on each corner. I laughed quietly, thinking about how public transportation and alcohol go together. I hope the crew doesn't touch the drinks. I followed the sounds of light jazz music into the interior of the ship. The music was nice and fit the riverboat theme. There was another small bar near the orchestra, and there I saw Katie. She was wearing a very cute green skirt and light cream blouse. She replaced her heels with some kind of deck shoes. Two young men were talking to her, and she seemed to enjoy it. I was a little disappointed to realize that I was no longer needed. Then I smiled, remembering my dating days. I left her there and went to the upper deck to watch the coastline. It was a very pleasant night for a river cruise. City lights always seem more distant when you can't hear the sounds of the city. Although there were several hundred people on board, I felt strangely alone with my thoughts as we sailed upriver. I leaned my elbows on the railing, content to watch the sun try to set behind the water. "I'm so glad you came." Katie came up behind me and joined me at the railing. What a beautiful night. She was holding a glass of what looked like iced tea. "I saw you downstairs and you seemed to be having fun." I smiled at her and received a smile in return. Figured I'd catch up with you later. I lied. I didn't want to be that annoying third wheel while she interacted with people her own age. "These two, please, Doug. They only wanted to talk about urea exhaust systems." She shrugged. "No offense, but everyone here is too passionate about transport issues." I was a little surprised. She sounded more like an outsider than a real public transport employee. What did she expect when she came here? I was going to ask her where she worked, but I realized that I wasn't interested. She just made it clear that she doesn't want to talk about work right now. Well, the drinks are free, the jazz is good, and the company is great. I raised my glass in the standard toasting position. She laughed and clinked her glass against mine, then took a sip. I couldn't believe she chose to spend time with me rather than those two tall guys downstairs. Maybe she just wanted to feel safe and comfortable tonight. This is what I could provide. Mary told me to protect you from all the drunken bream tonight. I felt better when I mentioned Mary again. I don't know why, but I needed Katie to know that I loved my wife. Well, I already feel safer. She smiled at me again and took my arm. Let's refresh these drinks. Katie didn't wait for an answer before she led me to the nearest minibar. She updated her Long Island tea, and I asked the bartender to add more whiskey since I had a lot of ice. Hand in hand, we walked around the ship. I noticed envious looks from people I knew from work when they saw me with this beautiful girl. I enjoyed the thought of the rumors that would follow. Most people knew that I was married. Everyone knew that I was not capable of winning against such a beautiful woman. I was going to leave it a mystery. I liked that people thought I was more masculine than I looked. I felt a strong hand on my shoulder and turned around to see my boss. "Doug, good to see you out of the hotel room." He had a very crooked smile on his face. Obviously, he started drinking before all the other participants. "Katie, this is my boss, Frank." I was a little embarrassed introducing Katie to him. I've only seen Frank drunk once, and it wasn't pretty. He has been in the transportation industry for almost 40 years. I think it takes a toll on a person. "Hi, Frank." Katie extended her hand, and Frank shook it. "Very nice to meet you." Frank didn't let go of her hand. "Katie, I'm so glad I got that old tightwad out of his hotel room." Frank was almost tongue-tied. Luckily, he was still standing upright. He usually hides at night. Sometimes friends aren't such friends after all. He was still holding Katie's hand. I was trying to figure out how to get out of this situation without being a jerk to my boss. Frank, Doug, and I are heading to the buffet. Katie didn't pull her hand away. She looked straight into his eyes. "Would you like to join?" "Oh no, you two have fun." He finally let go of Katie's hand and used it to drive us away. "I'll stay here in the fresh air." He smiled at me and winked. I think he thought it was some kind of male bonding. In his drunken state, it looked a little weak. Katie smiled and led me out of his communication area. "He'll need a chaperone if he doesn't slow down." She giggled at me. Katie was quite smart in getting us out of this situation without making a fuss. I was impressed. He's not usually like this. For some reason, I defended my boss. I think everyone needs to relax sometimes. After 2 glasses of whiskey, I didn't feel any pain either. Maybe we should eat to slow down. The buffet is a really good idea. We headed towards the buffet, following the signs. As expected, the buffet was great. There was a little bit of everything so that no one left hungry. Most of the dishes had a Creole twist, which I really liked. I filled my plate with too much food and laughed when I saw Katie do the same. She wanted to eat on the upper deck, which was more than to my liking. I enjoyed looking at the shore as the boat slowly floated along the river. I followed Katie up the narrow stairs and found myself staring at her ass swaying back and forth as she walked up the steps. She looked really cute in that green skirt, and I drank enough that I didn't feel guilty about it. I was proud of myself for making it to the top without dropping my plate or glass. Katie somehow found a secluded and empty place on the corner of the deck. There were 2 lawn chairs and a very small table for our food. This would be exactly the place Mary and I would choose to enjoy each other's company. I was surprised that a girl like Katie would want to escape the party, especially with an old man like me. We ate together in silence, sometimes pointing at something on the shore as the sun set on the horizon. It didn't take long before the waiter came over and offered to refresh our drinks. Katie answered yes before I had time to think about it. The waiter took our plates away and soon returned with fresh drinks. Katie raised her feet up onto the crossbar of the railing and relaxed. Her skirt moved down her thigh a little, and I liked what I saw. Her legs were well-toned. My mind wondered if they were as smooth to the touch as they looked. Her hand reached through the small table between us, and her hand lay softly on my hand. "I'm glad you came, Doug." She didn't look at me. It seemed innocent enough, so I let her leave her hand there. Alcohol was making itself felt. We sat there, watching the sunset, talking about nothing important. She liked some of the same TV shows that I did. We had little in common in politics, so we did not touch on this topic. It was just a relaxing conversation with a few laughs. We had 2 more drinks. The last one arrived before I even realized I had ordered it. I was on edge, but I still sipped on a new one. Life seemed good, and there was no reason to change anything now. The orchestra moved from light jazz to dance music with jazz overtones. Katie smiled and grabbed my hand. "Let's dance." She stood up, leaving me no time to answer. I stood up with her, not feeling awkward about my lack of dancing skills due to my alcohol intoxication. "I'm not a good dancer." I laughed as I followed her down the stairs. I didn't feel any pain when we entered the hall where the music was playing. There were about a dozen couples on the dance floor. Katie pulled me onto the dance floor and started moving her hips while holding my hands. She looked phenomenally sexy. I've never been so close to a woman who moved like that. It was intoxicating to watch her agitate her body. Katie laughed when she saw me looking at her and lifted my head with her hand. When I looked at her face again, she put her hands on my hips and made me move to the beat of the music. She became incredibly happy when I started moving, so I relaxed my muscles and let her hands guide me to the beat. After one song, the alcohol took over, and I relaxed enough that she could dance more freely. Katie was a treasure to watch. I danced with the most beautiful girl in this place and enjoyed it. Her fun became my fun as she used me to grind and bounce. I knew I was getting a little excited, but it was just a dance. I'm sure half the men in the room felt the same way as they watched that girl twist and squirm. There is something about a happy woman that attracts a man. When a woman looks like Katie, it becomes very difficult to control the physical manifestations of this attraction. We took a break after the next song to drink water. My guess was that Katie often went dancing and knew that the body needed more than alcohol to function. The water lifted me up, but did not reduce my intoxication. Katie pulled me back onto the dance floor as the next song started. God, she looked so good. I noticed a few envious glances among the men on the edge of the dance floor. Losers is all that came to my mind. At least I was cool for today. I may not have looked at it, but the proof was dancing with me. The orchestra's next song was a slow dance. I smiled at Katie and began to lead her off the dance floor. She wasn't going to let me go. She wrapped her arms around my neck and pulled me close to her. She took me by surprise, and I didn't know where to put my hands. She pressed herself close to me. Her head lay on my shoulder, her chest pressed against mine, and she began to slowly rock her hips. It had been almost 30 years since a woman other than my wife had held me like this. I hugged her waist and tried not to get excited. Her breasts felt wonderful pressing against my chest. I felt every movement of her hips spreading up my arms and back down my spine. Her hands gently touched the back of her head. I couldn't figure out if this was intentional or accidental. I told myself it was only because of the alcohol. We're just a little drunk, and it's just a dance. The feeling was incredible, and since I was drunk, I just enjoyed it. When the song ended, she tilted her head and kissed me lightly on the cheek. "Thanks, Doug. It was a pleasure." She walked away from me with a small smile. I was sure I was blushing. The kiss was more pleasant than the dance. For some reason, I felt like I was cheating on Mary. It was just one dance and an innocent kiss. I still felt guilty. I need to sit for a while. I told Katie, old people can always cite lack of stamina as a good excuse. Why don't you try to get our chairs back upstairs? Katie touched my hand tenderly. I need to go to the ladies' room and I'll catch up with you. She headed towards the toilets. The term, our chairs, scared me. I knew it was stupid to think she was attracted to me. The dance, the kiss, and our chairs were a little too much for my brain. When I went up to the upper deck, I chose seats closer to other people. It no longer seemed reasonable to me to be alone with Katie. I was afraid that I would misread the signals and embarrass myself and her. She was young, and young people were more used to being touched. I felt better and took a sip of my drink. The bartender forgot the ice. I was too drunk to care. We talked and laughed during the docking. I noticed that Katie was a little drunk. This was good because it meant that my brain was still working despite my condition. The last drink sent me well beyond my normal limits. I knew the morning would be hell, so I decided to enjoy the evening and ignore the impending doom. They announced a landing, but we did not move. We were having too much fun discussing Game of Thrones. Only after the third warning about the landing did we get up. A sober crew can be such a killer party. We helped each other down the stairs and up the ramp. I was 2 blocks from the hotel, and suddenly I was worried about Katie. There was no way he was going to let her walk the streets at this late hour alone. "Where are you staying?" I think I said, stopped with some slurring. She didn't seem to notice. "At the Biltmore." She started walking towards the hotel. "Me too, I'm on the 8th floor." I guess I shouldn't have been surprised. This was the main hotel of the exhibition. "I'm in room 834, she said and grabbed my hand to steady her steps. Katie was only 5 rooms away from mine. "Well, then it will be easy to be a gentleman and walk you to the door." I made a half bow to emphasize the formality. She laughed. We were drunk. It took us about 30 minutes to reach the 8th floor. We constantly stopped to tell each other something important. Of course, this was insignificant nonsense, which only drunks could consider important. Overall, it was a fun walk back. We got to room 834, and I waited to make sure she still had the key card. "I had a really good time today, Katie," I muttered as I began to say goodbye. She opened the door and turned to me. "Me too, Doug." Her smile was deadly. She grabbed my hand with hers. "You really are a good person." She started moving forward, and I thought she was trying to kiss me. I took a step back, but she held my hand. "I need to sleep." I looked at the door of my room. When I looked at her again, I smiled. "It's going to be a difficult morning." I decided that a little lightness would help get out of this awkward situation. There were already too many kisses for one evening. She raised my hand to her chest. "Spend the night with me." Her eyes were fixed directly on me. The words didn't sound drunk, but I knew she was drunk. I wanted my hand back, but it was pressed between her breasts, and she liked it there. My first instinct was to scream, yes. I suppressed this urge by imagining Mary packing her things and leaving the house. I was too drunk to think clearly. I didn't understand why a woman like her would even pay attention to me. What the hell happened to make the world change so much? Now I knew for sure that I was not mistaken. I pulled my hand away and raised both hands to shoulder level, palms facing out, in a sign of surrender. "I can't do this, Mary." I knew my eyes were filled with tears as I turned and ran to my room. What the hell did I almost do? I internally vowed never to come to another exhibition without Mary again. "Crap," Katie exclaimed. He didn't sound drunk, just annoyed. My shoulder hit the doorframe. I was quite drunk, and it was difficult to control my body. I fumbled around for my key card. "Doug, wait, I need to tell you something." I didn't want to hear anything more. I inserted the card into the slot, and it turned green. I quickly opened the door and closed it behind me. I leaned against the door and took a few deep breaths. What the hell just happened? I went to the bathroom and splashed water on my face. When I looked in the mirror, I was stunned. At best, I looked average. I'm not saying that someone couldn't eventually like me, but there was no reason for Katie to become attached to me so quickly. Something is wrong here. I was too drunk to think clearly. I needed to sleep and think about everything in the morning. There was a soft knock on the door. I knew who it was and didn't want to reveal it. I thought about catching an early flight home. It might cost me a little, but it would be better than running into Katie tomorrow. The knock was repeated, as soft as the first. I called through the door. "We're just too drunk, Katie. I shouldn't have let it get this far." I tried to sound reasonable and give her a way out. "We'll be better in the morning." "I only had one drink tonight, Doug." She sounded sober. I saw her drink all those Long Island teas, but suddenly I remembered that I had only seen one done to her. "We need to talk." Now I really found myself in a quandary. A crazy woman came to mind, maybe a thief or a sick pervert. Neither of these scenarios pushed me to open the door. "Not today, Katie." I was drunk, but determined. I was definitely going to catch an early flight home. I could go straight to the airport and take the first available flight in the morning. I slipped the card under the door. I saw an envelope appear. This is from Mary. Have you ever experienced a moment when the cold penetrated you so much that you felt a little sick? This was one of those moments. I looked down at the blue envelope and saw my name written in Mary's handwriting. I was afraid to pick it up. What kind of trick could this be? Sorry, Doug, it was a stupid bet. There was defeat in Katie's voice. Just read the map so you don't call the police on me. I lifted the envelope and pulled out a birthday card. There was a handwritten note inside. My dear Doug, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. It pains me to realize that my body has changed with age. I know you miss us in bed. I know I've been avoiding this topic and leaving you frustrated. It's not that my love has changed, only my body has changed, which betrayed us. The doctor said my desire might come back, but I made you wait too long. As strange as it may sound, Katie is my birthday present to you. I want you to enjoy your time with her and return your heart to me. I just can't let you be without this anymore. This is causing me too much pain. With love, Mary. In shock, I opened the door and, knowing that Katie would follow me, I walked back into the room. I plopped down on the bed with tears in my eyes. How did I let Mary think I was so desperate? Why did she think she had to do this for me? I would never leave her because of sex. I heard the water start running in the bathroom, and soon Katie came in with a glass of water, which she handed me. You better drink some water. She sounded like a different person. I'm sorry I made you drunk, but you didn't give in. I only half understood what she was saying. My head was spinning as I drank water, spilling it on my leg. What? What's going on? The room was spinning a little. I was worried that my marriage was damaged. I wanted Mary to be here. Your wife hired me as a surrogate of sorts. Katie sat down next to me. She said it would be hard to get you to agree, but she was sure you needed it. She stroked my back like the mother of a sick child. I drank some more water and spilled it again. I ruined everything. I meant my marriage. I was worried that I had put too much pressure on Mary. I need to go home. I tried to get up, but my legs wouldn't obey me. The glass of water was no longer in my hand, and I didn't know where it had gone. I fell back onto the bed and realized I wasn't going anywhere. My eyes closed, and I didn't want to open them again. SHH, you're not going anywhere tonight. I felt myself being dragged further onto the bed. Katie took off my shoes and put a pillow under my head. I have to call Mary. I barely understood what I was saying. Something was wrong, and I needed to call her. Say it doesn't matter, that I only need her. I didn't know where my phone was, and the hotel phone was far away on the nightstand. I was starting to zone out. Hi, this is Katie. Katie was talking to someone. I couldn't open my eyes to see. Oh no, he kind of passed out. There was a pause. I don't think this is working the way you wanted. Yes, he is quite drunk, but he seems afraid that he is losing you. Another pause. No, I tried, but even after he saw the card, he wasn't going to. Look, I'm no expert, but I don't think this is good for him. He's such a nice guy, and I don't feel very good about what I did tonight. I tried to open my eyes. She must be talking to Mary. Nothing was working correctly, and I started disconnecting again. Are you sure? I missed part of the conversation. Katie must have been pacing the room. Her voice was getting closer, then was removed. Okay, I won't refuse this. Everything plunged into darkness. My head hurt as the light began to attack my eyes. I tried to turn away from the light source, but something soft and heavy pressed my legs. The light was too bright to open my eyes quickly, so I raised my hand to cover them. I felt pleasure between my legs. I haven't felt anything like this in years. I tried to lift my head, but the movement caused a sharp pain, so I relaxed. I slowly raised my head, and it hurt less. I opened my eyes, covered with my hand, and saw only bright sunlight until my eyes began to adjust. My vision began to return, and I focused on the gorgeous woman. Whiskey, Katie, birthday card, it all came back to me. Katie, no. I tried to push myself away. Good morning, dear. It was Mary's voice, but she was not in the room. Katie looked up and smiled, pointing at the phone next to me. He was on speakerphone. Mary, we don't need to do this. I didn't know what this meant for our marriage. It took me a long time to find the right girl. Mary ignored my opinion. I didn't know whether to find someone completely different or someone more like me. Eventually, I decided to find someone with my features, only younger and prettier. Mary spoke as if she were choosing curtains. Oh God, I was losing the battle of trying not to get aroused. I don't need it, Mary. You are the most beautiful woman I know. Of course you think so, but admit it, my breasts have never been as big or firm as hers. Mary giggled. Mary, I can't do this. I felt guilty for enjoying it. I knew my voice sounded tense, but I couldn't do anything about it. Katie also has some talents that I don't have. I heard a smile in her voice, something all men want but few women can offer. Mary, oh God, Mary, I love you. Mary, we could talk about this. I don't need to have sex to love you. I started to come to my senses and had just had sex with someone who was not my wife. I couldn't understand how this could be good for our marriage. Katie just calmly ignored the conversation. I know, dear. I always knew. Mary sounded so soothing. That doesn't mean it has to be that way. Sex is just sex. She laughed a little. Katie seems to be good at this too. You know how weird this is, right? I was still trying to comprehend the whole situation. How many marriages can survive if the husband cheats? How many wives choose other women? Mary was not the least bit worried. Believe it or not, this is as much for me as it is for you. It took me 4 months to find Katie. You have to admit, she's very impressive. Yeah, she's amazing. Fine. She'll get you cleaned up and you can take her to lunch. Now Mary was planning our day. Lunch, what time is it? I looked at my watch and it was 11:30. Damn, I was supposed to meet Frank at the seminar at 10 in the morning. As if it mattered now, it was just my inner pedant. Frank gave you a day to recover. Mary giggled into the phone. I yelled at him for letting you get so drunk last night. I think he thinks he's covering for you. Honey, I love you. I didn't really feel ready for the show today. I wondered how long Mary had been planning all this. I love you too, darling. We'll talk later today. I saw the line disconnect, and I was again left alone with the young naked goddess. It's really weird, isn't it? I looked at Katie with a stupid expression on my face. I've seen things, Doug. She extended her hand to help me get out of bed. It's kind of cute and weird. I took her hand, and she pulled my naked body up. Your wife loves you so much that she hired one of the best in the business for you. She smiled at her self-compliment and led me to the bathroom. I probably smelled and looked pretty bad from last night. I was surprised that my head didn't hurt. Tell me about Mary, Katie said matter-of-factly, almost like a small talk. What do you want to know? I felt awkward talking about Mary with another woman in the shower. Well, you and Mary used to have a lot of sex, right? It looks like talking about sex will be the topic of the day. When we first got married, we had sex all the time. Katie rubbed behind her ears and on the top of her neck. Everything was so new to us. We were running around the house naked, just looking for another room to have sex. God, that was fun. I remembered those times with tenderness. Katie gently held my head under the water to rinse off the shampoo. I took Katie downtown for lunch. I really didn't want to meet anyone from work, especially Frank. We found a small Creole place with cozy tables. We chose a table by the window to watch people pass by. We cheerfully commented on the various fashions passing by the window. Some people, like us, were just starting their day. Katie was a great conversationalist. She carried on the conversation without adhering to any point of view. I enjoyed the interaction and wondered if she enjoyed it too, or if it was a job for her. I wanted to know more about her, but I felt that she did not want to go in that direction. I followed her lead and talked about trivial things. I simply allowed myself to enjoy communicating with such a beautiful woman. Mary told me you like superhero movies. Katie smiled at me, and I knew she had something else in mind. The Amazing Spider-Man is showing 4 blocks from here. They have an afternoon session in an hour. I laughed. Mary hates it when I drag her to these kinds of movies. It was hard to stop laughing. I'm afraid you're stuck with a lot of unwanted tasks. Mary tried to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I don't mind at all. I've been collecting comics for years. Katie looked a little embarrassed as she talked about her personal life. I spent too much on early Avengers issues. It was a surprise. I never would have thought she was a fan. Can't be, you're a collector. I was still trying to imagine her curled up in her chair with a comic book. The image did not add up. I kept all the ones I bought before I got married. I stopped buying them when Mary came along. It was nice to think of 2 boxes in my basement, each book in its own bag. I have 2 full boxes at home. I think each one holds a couple hundred. Is it true what you read? Katie looked worried. Not her professionally excited one, but her genuinely joyful one. I was really into the X-Men, so I have a lot of them. I know I had a lot of Spider-Man when Secret Wars was going on. I couldn't believe I was talking to Katie about comics. I think I even have a little bit of the Avengers. I may have the copy you are looking for. I keep a list on the internet. She took a pen from her purse and wrote on the napkin. If you have something that I'm not here for, I'll be happy to buy them from you. She handed me a napkin with a URL written on it. Her face was glowing. She was more than just a collector. She was obsessed. Katie, if I have something you need, I'll just give it to you. I didn't know how much Mary was paying her, but these books would be my tip. I can't accept. She paused for a moment and laughed a little. Yes, I can. I will gladly accept whatever you are willing to give. Katie smiled at me. Let's go see Spider-Man. We walked hand in hand to the cinema. I felt like I was hanging out with a girl. I think that's what it was like for today. Katie was practically jumping down the street. I couldn't believe the change in her after talking about comics. She looked the same, but her excitement had lost the falseness that I had not realized before. We spent 4 quarters discussing our favorite Marvel films and berating directors for deviating from the original stories. I felt that there was a connection between us. We could actually become friends, which could ruin Mary's plans. I don't think Mary imagined that I would ever talk to Katie after the exhibition. We shared a box of popcorn and enjoyed the movie. I don't know what it is with superhero movies. You know the end before they begin, but you still root for the masked vigilante and hate the villains. It must be the happy ending that attracts me. Knowing that all is right in the world when the projector finally stops has a powerful appeal. Katie took my hand as we left the theater. I want to show you my collection. She turned in front of me, pulling me along with her. My apartment is a few blocks from here, right in that direction. She pointed to the east. It would be cool. I was excited to learn more about Katie. I was surprised that she wanted to share her real personality with me. I followed her, and she wrapped her other hand around mine and pressed herself against me. It was more tender than I expected, but I decided to enjoy her closeness. I liked the smell of her hair. Katie had a small apartment on the 3rd floor of a renovated stone building. It looked like it had once been a bank, but it was difficult to determine. Katie opened the door to her apartment, and I walked into another world. I'd put Katie in her mid-30s. Her apartment looked like a dorm room. Instead of framed pictures, she hung posters. The furniture was an eclectic mix of comfortable pieces. The carpet was old but covered with rugs, giving it an Indian look. In a strange way, I felt at home. I rarely have guests. She quickly moved forward to move the dirty dishes from the counter to the sink. I smiled at her. I nodded, looking around. My gaze fell on the shelves. I couldn't believe what I saw. The shelves were filled with board games, and not the bad ones you'd find in most homes. It's rare to find someone who shares my passion for designer games. Mary played a few easy games with me, but I belonged to a group that met once a month where I could play some real serious games. I walked over to the shelves while Katie was busy cleaning the kitchen. The shelves had all the good standards: Puerto Rico, Stone Age, Carcassonne, Colonials, and Kalis, to name a few. There were even a few new games that I had not yet played. Some of them were still on tape. One of the challenges of board gaming is finding people willing to learn new games. I also have a lot of unwatched games. My finger touched several variations of Ticket to Ride and many Dominion boxes. Katie was a gamer. I wonder if Mary knew about this. Maybe she thought that playing with a sexy girl would be part of the gift. Katie walked up to me, looking a little embarrassed. "This is my other collection. A little childish, I know." She gently placed her hand on one of the boxes. "Most people don't realize that it's much better than Monopoly. How can you have Agricola in a film when Caverna is already open next door?" Both games were from the same designer, but Agricola was much older. Her smile lit up the whole room. "Free shipping." Katie said this as she gently hit my arm. "Agricola made my order over $100, so it only cost me $10. She gently stroked the place where she hit. "Doug, you're a gamer." "Once a month, every month." I smiled back. "I think you have most of my collection duplicated here." "Do you think Mary knew about this?" Her face became more serious. "This has to be more than just a coincidence." I was thinking the same thing. I looked at Katie with new eyes. If I weren't so in love with Mary, Katie would be my dream girl. She didn't look like a nerd, but she was one. What was Mary thinking? "Would you like to play a quick game of Nordic countries if you're up for it?" She enthusiastically pulled the game off the shelf. "I will defeat you." She was more than ready. She was delighted. I guess you could say she was paid to play. I would have quit my job a long time ago if they paid for games. We set up the game. Katie played the purple ones. I played the black ones. We spent the next 15 minutes fighting over sections of the railroad. The game was coming to an end, and I realized that I was holding the cards needed to complete my tasks and end the game. I knew Katie needed more time. She had just taken on new assignments, and her expression made it clear that they were difficult. I decided to give her a few more turns. I played my red cards to take the neutral site. This left me with no reds for the red section I needed. I spent 7 turns trying to collect the red cards needed to complete the final section. I didn't have time to do this, and Katie finished the game first. We revealed our missions, and I lost badly by not finishing the red route. Her smile was contagious. She didn't boast while we put the components away, which made my defeat more enjoyable. Katie put the box back on the shelf. She came back to me and extended her hand. I took her, and she pulled me into the bedroom. I was expecting to see her comic book collection. She pushed me to the end of the bed and pushed me down. The smile was still on her face as she pulled her shirt over her head. "I won, so now I can fuck you." She took off her bra, revealing her magnificent breasts. "What would happen if I won?" Katie laughed. "Same thing, I just wouldn't have as much fun." Katie and I had sex. It was excellent. We were both covered in sweat and Katie was still breathing heavily. I began to gently stroke her back, wondering where her desire came from. I couldn't believe how good it felt. I could really fall in love with a girl like Katie. This thought hit me hard. There was no Mary in it. What the hell am I doing? I rolled Katie too quickly and sat down. "I liked this too much," I said, looking at the wall. I wasn't sure if I should leave. I wasn't sure of anything. I heard a quiet sob and looked at her tear-stained eyes. "I'm sorry." Katie tried not to cry. "I didn't mean to." I knew what she meant, and I knew she felt it too. What the hell was Mary thinking when she thought of this? I lay back down and hugged Katie, holding her to my chest. I couldn't just leave after that. "What the hell was Mary thinking?" I said out loud. "You need to call her Doug." I felt her cry again on my chest. "You can't stay here. This will ruin everything." I stroked her hair, not wanting to break the hug, but knowing I had to. I sat down again, lifting her up with me. I wiped her tears with my thumb and kissed her forehead. "Sorry, I have to go." I slowly got up and started getting dressed. Katie didn't move from the bed and just looked at the floor. "Are you okay?" I asked softly. She looked up at me. "I'll just lie down and listen to music." She sighed. "I'll be fine." I realized that if I didn't leave, she wouldn't be okay. I finished getting dressed and headed towards the door. "Goodbye, Katie." I said this without looking back. There was no answer, so I quietly closed the bedroom door and headed out of the apartment. Before I could even reach for the handle, I heard the familiar sounds of Sugar Magnolia coming from behind the bedroom door. Something was really wrong. The details began to form in my mind, and my eyes filled with tears. I returned to the bedroom and opened the door. "The Grateful Dead is your favorite band." Tears streamed down my cheeks. I already knew the answer because they were my favorite band. Katie was stunned by my return and just nodded. I sat back down on the bed. "Something is really wrong. Mary wants us to be together." I couldn't hold back my tears. There was only one reason why she could do this. I didn't notice the signs even though I should have. Katie came closer and hugged me from behind. "Why does she do this?" Katie started crying again. "I know she loves you and you love her." I started to cry. I didn't want to say it out loud. "Oh shit, it can't be Doug." She guessed what I already knew. I forced myself to stop crying and Katie wiped my tears away. "You have to call her now." Katie tried to take my phone out of my pocket. I got it myself. She turned off the stereo, stood up and left the room, quietly closing the door behind her. "Hello, Mary." I didn't know where to start. "Hi, Doug. Did you and Katie have a good day?" She sounded cheerful. I shouldn't have done this over the phone, but waiting would have been even worse. "I know what you're doing, Mary." There was a long pause. I didn't want to continue. I was afraid that I would start crying. "We're back at it again. It's just sex. Stupid." Mary was not as confident as she had been in the morning. "Try to tell me you don't like it." "When were you going to tell me?" I didn't want to talk about Katie anymore. I also didn't want to be rude. Mary must have known that I understood. I heard her start to cry and my eyes filled with tears again. "After you fall in love with her, I couldn't bear the thought of leaving you alone." Mary tried to hold back her tears and failed. I was sure she heard me cry. "Sorry, I didn't notice." "There must be something we can do." I cried again. "I should be at home with her." "No, just come home and bring Katie with you." Mary could barely finish her sentence. There was no way I was going to bring Katie home. "I'll come home alone. I love you and will always love you." I said it more forcefully. "It will just be you and me and no one else." I heard her cry again. "Okay, then let me talk to Katie." I didn't want to let that happen, so I kept quiet, trying to think of a reason why not to do it. "I'll call her anyway, Doug." Mary was persistent. I didn't want to share this time with anyone. I opened the bedroom door. Katie was sitting on the sofa in a robe. Her eyes were inflamed and red. "She wants to talk to you." I handed over the phone. I should have just hung up and gone home. Katie reluctantly took the phone. "Hello?" Katie's voice was weak. She looked at the floor. I understood that she was in a hopeless situation. She looked up at me with tear-stained eyes. "Yes." There was a long pause and Katie wiped her eyes. "I promise." I didn't know what she was promising, and I didn't want to know. "Fine." Katie hung up and stood up to give me the phone back. When I took it, she leaned over and kissed me on the cheek. "You need to go home, Doug." She walked me to the door. I saw that she was struggling with her thoughts. I didn't have time to help her. I needed to go home to Mary. I left, not expecting to ever see her again. November 12th has always been a sad day. Mary died 7 years ago on this very day, and the drive home from work was especially tiring. I really wish I could cross this date off my calendar. Everyone at work knew and left me alone, which made the day even longer. When you lose someone so close, a part of you dies with them. There's not much you can do about it. You grieve and time begins to heal, but there will always be a feeling that something is missing. I parked in the driveway and waited for the garage door to go up. Our love was pure and genuine. This cannot be forgotten. I turned off the engine and headed towards the door to the kitchen. Taking a deep breath to clear my thoughts, I opened the door. Dad, the cute 5-year-old girl with black hair, rushed into my arms. It's hard to be sullen when you're greeted like that. It didn't matter what day it was. "How are you, Mary?" I said, hugging her and lifting her onto my hip. She sat there so comfortably. I kissed her forehead and hugged her tightly. "Mom said we can play Candyland when you get home." Mary was beaming, and I could see that she was very excited about the upcoming game. I prepared everything and didn't need any help. She slipped out of my arms and ran towards the dining room, where I was sure the game was already ready. "Let Daddy catch his breath a little, honey." Katie walked out of the hallway with a smile. She was as beautiful as always. Motherhood suited her, and she handled it well. "Hard day?" She kissed me and gently stroked my cheek. She knew what day it was. She promised Mary that she would be at the funeral. When Mary asked her if she could love me, Kathy said yes. Mary made sure I wouldn't be alone. "Yes," I smiled. "I'm very glad to be home." "Mom, Dad, everything is ready." Mary was still the center of my life. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think. Click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click